Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus. Our Women in Focus today belongs to the sciences and the medical community. And I have a feeling that this is going to be one of those interviews where she's going to be telling us a lot of things about how we can keep ourselves healthy, or how can we look after ourselves so that we are not struggling in our old age, like me, right now. Her name is Ruhina Rana. I hope I've pronounced it right.
That's perfect.
You're most welcome in our program. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, when I said medical, so you're with the Faculty and Health Sciences Research Coordinator.
Yes.
What does a research coordinator do?
Well, I'm at Douglas College, which I love being at because I was a student there. So it feels really wonderful to have been educated there and now be able to give back in a positive way. So I started there as faculty, so teaching nursing at the school, and it's an excellent nursing program, and I love being a part of it. I work with amazing people. And I'm in my 5th year now, but about just over 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to develop a proposal to create a position called the Health Sciences Research Coordinator.
Okay.
And so
you're the one who...
I'm the first one. But I think a lot of people had the idea that as healthcare providers, we need to use the best evidence, the emerging science to guide us. We can't just sort of wing it or think about things, based on opinion.
Right.
I mean, sometimes that stuff is helpful, but mostly we really need to ground ourselves in the evidence.
Right.
And so I realized that a lot of my colleagues really struggled to incorporate that work in with their teaching. They were so focused and dedicated to their students and being great educators, but it wasn't really part of our mandate to be doing research and creating that evidence. But as practitioners, it's important that all of us are contributing from our different perspectives, and particularly from nursing being so women focused and being primarily women, we want to make sure that we're capturing those perspectives.
Right.
And now that we're seeing so much diversity in nursing, we want to make sure that we're capturing those diverse perspectives within not just our practices, but in our research as well.
So teaching nursing means that you've been in that profession for a long time. So did you want to become a nurse?
I didn't, actually. My nanny always wanted me to be a nurse. And I was saying before how sometimes in South Asian families, when you're growing up, the only acceptable professions are to be like a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, and sometimes a nurse. And so I always thought I wanted to be a doctor.
Right.
And so I'd done a degree in neuroscience and psychology, planning to do my pre-med. I was studying for my MCATs, which is the exam to get into medical school. And my nanny, who I was extremely close to, grew up with her, always in the house. We shared a bedroom until I was 15 years old.
Wow.
I was glued to her. And she fell ill. She developed cancer of the tongue and throat. And that was a really hard time. And she was so courageous. And we were in and out of the BC Cancer Center. And they took amazing care of her, but it was there that I really had the first opportunity to see the relationship that doctors had with their patients. And while they do amazing work, they spend so little time with their patients just because of the nature of their job. They have to move on to the next person. And I quickly realized that wasn't the relationship I wanted to have with the people that I was trying to help.
Right.
And so I started kind of watching who was in the healthcare center, who was helping, the different roles they had, the contributions they made. And I realized that the nurses really had a very close relationship with their patients. They spent 12 hours with them.
Yes.
They got to know them as people. They comforted them. It wasn't just about doing the science, although that was a huge part of it. It was really about connecting with them as people. And it made such a difference to my grandmother's care that I started to think, well, maybe my nanny was right. Maybe I should think about nursing. But the things that attracted me to medicine weren't just helping people, although that was a big part of it.
Right.
I really wanted to also do research and to teach and to make changes, positive changes in the healthcare system. And it wasn't until one of the nurses at Royal Columbian Hospital, my grandmother got very weak as part of her cancer treatment and had fallen one night going to the bathroom. And she broke her hip. And so we went to the Royal Columbian Hospital, and she was waiting to have her surgery. And I was, dealing with this internal dilemma of, do I want to be a doctor or do I want to be a nurse? I don't know anymore. And a nurse there very confidently said to me, nurses do research, nurses teach, nurses contribute to the healthcare system. And that was it. The next day, I applied for nursing school, and I felt very confident about that decision.
Isn't that a beautiful story? I mean, the catalyst in your family, your nanny, and the way, she guided you to go to the profession that you were meant to be in, right? And
yeah, it teaches you should always listen to your nanny. I should have listened to her from the beginning.
I should have. Talking about nanny, were you born, brought up here, or are you from outside?
So my family is from India. My mom's side is from Kashmir, but most live in Gujarat now.
Yes.
And my oldest sister was born in India, and then my family came 1973, and my middle sister and myself were born here in Canada.
Oh wow, isn't that interesting? And so how was the family dynamic? Was it being born in the north of India and that to Kashmir? You hardly look Indian.
Yes.
So do people come up and say that to you?
All the time.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that a lot because I'm very proud of my heritage, but people don't often recognize me as South Asian. I don't have an accent. My skin is very fair. My eyes are light. Even my hair is sort of a lighter brown. And so phenotypically, I don't look South Asian.
Yes.
And that's hard because it's such an important part of my identity, and it actually is a struggle for me not to have that outward appearance.
Right.
I wish that I had that. And so my husband laughs because even though I'm very sun safe, I spend a lot of the time trying to tan so that maybe I could look a little bit more South Asian than I do in the winter.
In the winter,
So, yeah.
I want to take a very short commercial break and come back and talk a little bit more about the family. And you said husband.
Yes.
So how did you meet him and all that? I want to find out about that. Let's take a short break and come back. Ruhina Rana is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Ruhina Rana is our Woman in Focus today. So we were talking about you and your family being born and brought up here. And then you slipped in, and my husband.
Yeah.
So when and how did you meet him?
I met my husband 18 and a half years ago, and I was very young. I was 22 years old, and we met out dancing. And he is 15 years older than me, but he looks very young, and apparently I look older than I am. So we thought we were about the same age.
Yes.
But he was very smart, and he had done his degree in mathematics, and he had a great sense of humor. And he was interested in the science research that I was doing at the time in neurosciences. This was prior to becoming a nurse.
Right.
And he was fascinated with the work that I was doing, and I just thought he was fantastic. And
wow.
we just hit it off right from the beginning. So.
And how was it with the parents?
You know, I was a little bit nervous that my mom wouldn't accept, he's Caucasian, he's 15 years older than I am, but my mom was incredible. She is like the most open-minded and accepting woman, and she just only wanted me to be happy, and she saw that I was happy.
Right.
And he has been the most incredible son-in-law to her.
Wow.
Sometimes I think she would choose him over me. The two of them are thick as thieves. They'll sit around plotting the rest of our lives, drinking chai, and then they'll fill me in on the plan for my life that they have made. So,
of course.
Yes, they are wonderful together.
So it is beautiful when parents, kids do, South Asian kids especially, do have this inherent fear in their mind that the person that I'm going to be choosing, is my family going to like or not?
Yes.
Although I think in majority of the families, parents just want their kids to be happy, no matter who they marry. But of course, they've got to keep that persona going. You have to ask, you have to marry within the community, and so on and so forth. So it is good to have parents that I guess are broad-minded, right?
Yes. And I think part of that is because my mother went to a a boarding school in India.
Yes.
And, you know, she was very fortunate to come from sort of a line of courageous women.
Yes.
So my great-grandfather was a magistrate, and even in the 20s in India, under British occupation,
Right.
saw the value of education for women. And so he had his daughters educated. Now, they couldn't go to school at the time, but he
Right.
would bring tutors into the house. And my grandmother was not interested.
No.
She wanted to learn to read the Quran, but mostly she just wanted to learn to cook.
Yes.
And so she would trick the tutors into teaching her cooking instead. But I think as she got older, she realized how much of an advantage it was that she was educated.
Right.
And so my grandfather and my grandmother made the decision together to send my mom to school. And so she went to a British boarding school in Pune and was, you know, well educated. And so I think by the time, you know, we'd all come to Canada and I was born here, my family, even though they were holding on to many of those traditions, were open to the ideas of really embracing being Canadian.
Right.
I didn't get that same response necessarily from extended family, who were a
No.
little bit more cautious about accepting the man that I had chosen, and would say things like, well, we can introduce you to a nice, you know, Indian man, a nice Muslim man. And I thought, well, I'm sure you could, but you can't help who you fall in love with.
No, isn't that just
Yeah.
amazing the way you were meant to meet him?
Yes.
It was written in the stars, as
Yes.
they say.
I like to think my nanny sent him to me. She
Yeah.
passed, unfortunately, before they had an opportunity to meet, which breaks my heart a little bit, but she would have absolutely loved him.
That relationship is very sacred, isn't it?
Absolutely. And for me, my husband has 3 children from his first marriage.
Yes.
And I'm so proud of them. They're amazing kids.
Yeah.
And they're my stepchildren, but they're the only children that I'm going to ever have.
Right.
Because I chose not to have any biological children. And my husband and I have had those discussions about how we want to be everyday grandparents. I don't
Yes.
want to only see our grandchildren on birthdays and holidays. I want to see them every day. I want to have fried potatoes waiting when they get home from school, like my nanny used to have for me. And so we've talked to, you know, the kids and said, like, how would you feel if
Yes.
when you guys are ready to start families, if we moved very close to you so that
Yes.
we can be in their lives? Because I want to be like the nanny that I had. I want to be there for Tuesday swing and Friday soccer and, you know, making samosas on the weekend. And I want to do all of those things. And even though, you know, these children are not South Asian,
Right.
they're so good with my mom.
Right.
And they love learning about, you know, our culture, and, you know, they're always learning to cook. I mean, that's such a big part of our culture, is
Of
the
course.
food,
Cook.
right? The food, yes,
Yeah.
the food. And so, you know, they'll like, for Christmas, my mom got them the Gujarati spice tins, you know, and taught them about the different spices. And oh, my one stepdaughter makes an amazing butter chicken. And like, they're so fantastic, the way that they've embraced this culture, even though it's through marriage, they still
Right.
take it on, which makes me so proud.
You mentioned you decided not to have any children. Why?
I was always really passionate about having a family, but I never cared how I came by it. I always thought maybe I would adopt, or I would have foster children, or maybe I would meet somebody with kids. But I knew from a very young age that I wanted a career, and I also wanted a family. And I struggled with negotiating how I would do both of those things to the best of my ability. And so it was actually wonderful to meet somebody with 3 fantastic kids, so that I still had a family, but I never had to step away from the pursuit of my career. So
Isn't that interesting?
it was kismet. I think it was meant to be.
Kismet.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
We are talking to Ruhina Rana. I will take a short break and come back. Don't go away. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Ruhina Rana is our Woman in Focus today. So Ruhina, in the beginning of the program we talked about the profession that you're in. So how long is the nursing program, and do they get a job right away? Because there is a shortage of nurses everywhere in the world, isn't it?
Absolutely. There is a shortage all over the world. And so the moment that they graduate, they have their choice of jobs.
Wow.
So in the actual program, most programs are about 4 years, and they might structure that a little bit differently. So at Douglas, we have a 1 year of foundation, so it's sort of prerequisite courses, and then 3 years of nursing kind of intensive. Other schools do it a little bit differently. And during that time, they're learning both in the classroom, in a laboratory to develop skills, and then in the clinical with live patients, developing all those skills, and not just the psychomotor skills of giving a shot and doing that, but also how to talk to people, how to listen well, how to pick out those important features that, you know, maybe they didn't tell anybody else, because again, we have that relationship with our patients. They begin to trust us, and the thing that they were too scared to maybe tell their doctor or some other care provider, they've just spent the last 8 to 12 hours with you, and they're like, you know what, I need to tell you this thing. And so you have that amazing opportunity to help them in a way that maybe someone else couldn't. And so you have to be listening, and you have to be aware, and you have to be kind of sharp all the time to make sure that you're not missing those opportunities to
So giving that jab in your arm or the hip, is there a technique to it?
Oh, absolutely, there is. But as I often say to my students, you could train monkeys to do all of those things. And I mean, I say that tongue in cheek, but I mean, we train family members and people to do it to themselves and to their loved ones. You know, diabetics, they give themselves shots. This is not a complicated skill. It's something you do have to learn, and there's technique behind it. But it's what you do in and around that, the assessment of a person, being able to look at them and say, I notice your breathing is labored, or the color of your skin tells me that you're not getting enough oxygen, or the texture of your hair tells me that your nutrition might not be, you know, adequate. What's going on financially? Are you able to afford healthy food? It's all those thinking pieces that is really the crux of what nursing is that most of the public doesn't see.
No. And I think, and from what you're saying and what we've noticed, I think nurses are as good as doctors as far as deciphering what is going on with the patient.
I think doctors and nurses both play incredibly important roles, and unfortunately our healthcare system is structured like the military, where there's a hierarchy and this hegemony of power.
Male-dominated, sorry.
Absolutely, but regardless, even if you had a hospital full of women, our system still pits us against each other. You know, the doctors have more authority than the nurses. But the fact is, nobody is better or worse than anyone. They're educated differently, and we have complementary skills. I can't do my job without a physician's diagnosis, but a physician can't do their job without my data collection and care provision. So we need each other, and it's complementary care. And so often our students are like, well, I'm waiting for the doctor to tell me what to do. No, you know what you need to do. You work with the doctor, not for them. And so, and I don't say that to take anything away from physicians. I think they're amazing, and they go to school for a long time, and they're incredibly intelligent, but our roles are different and complementary.
So what is the most beautiful thing about being a nurse? I know I know what you're gonna say, but what is the most difficult thing?
Oh, the most difficult thing, I think, knowing that if our system was structured differently, that we might be able to help more people or prevent more illness. And our healthcare system is not structured that way. We are very focused on treatment and reactivity. Someone gets sick, how do I treat it? How do I try and fix it? But what we really need to focus on is prevention. How do we look upstream and say, how can I prevent people from getting sick? If I could make sure that everybody had good nutrition, access to clean water, clean air, low stress lifestyles, unburdened from addiction, good sleep patterns, good community and family dynamics, time for peace in their life, whether that's meditation or prayer, however they find peace. If we could ensure that every single person had that, I might be out of a job, and I would be okay with that. But we don't focus on those things.
So is it the system that has been there forever, and we are just following it, and the health department can't do anything about it? Is the minister, maybe we should get Mr. Dix to come and talk about it.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things where we've been doing it this way for so long.
Yeah, so you get into a groove of things.
Yes, and it's very hard to think about dismantling a system and rebuilding it. We tend
Right.
to be more of a add-on instead of scrap and start again. That seems quite daunting.
Yes,
but
and scary to a
is
certain
very
extent.
scary, and not just for people in politics, but even the practitioners who've been trained to be reactive. It would be a huge paradigm shift for them to suddenly start working on prevention. I mean, we have community health nurses that already do that, but most of us who work in the hospital, that would be a big shift for us to have to start thinking about giving people advice about their nutrition or
Right.
about sleep or about stress reduction. We do some of that, but we're not experts in those areas. We have some expertise, but we're not experts in those areas because our training is about, well, someone's sick, how do you fix it?
Yeah. Band-aid solutions.
Correct.
So now you're still studying.
I am.
What are you doing now?
I'm doing a PhD in nursing, which everyone thinks I'm crazy when I say that, but
I don't think it's crazy.
I think, again, I had those amazing role models, women in my family that were so courageous, that did things even though maybe other people didn't do them. My mom started out as a secretary in a long-term care hospital and would
Wow.
learn everybody's job. And then she became, the purchasing, and then she moved up into HR. And then by the time I was 16 years old, she was the administrator of the hospital.
Wow.
And she instilled this amazing work ethic in me, but also not to see limits as walls, but to see them as opportunities. So just because nobody's done it before, it doesn't mean that you can't be the first. And so, and I'm certainly not the first doing what I'm doing, but it just means that just because it looks difficult or it seems crazy to some people, that it's okay. You just do what feels right to you. And I want to make a difference in the education of future nurses. I want to try and help the healthcare system be better. I want the research that is coming out of healthcare, in particular nursing, to be high quality. And I want people to feel like that's an accessible part of their job.
Right.
And so for me to be able to be in a position to influence that kind of change, I need a PhD. And so I, just over a year ago, started a PhD in nursing at Trinity Western University.
Wow.
And it's been an amazing experience. I'm being mentored by some of the most amazing minds in
So
our
next
field.
time I meet you, I'll call you Dr. Rana.
Maybe. Maybe. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being a woman in focus today. We could keep talking till the cows come home, and we wouldn't be finished yet.
Definitely not. Thank you so much for having me.
Ruhina Rana has been our woman in focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.